System administration tools. So in this, we're going to go through basically a bunch of different system administration tools. And then I recommend you go onto a computer and you actually hands-on get familiar with these. And we'll go through a lab later to make sure we do that. Computer management. So computer management component is a consolidation of a lot of different tools into one application. If you notice here on the left side, you can see the left pane, you have the system tools with a bunch of different tools under that. You have storage with the disk management, and then you have services and applications. And we'll talk about each of those tools individually, but essentially computer management is just one place to easily get to a bunch of different tools. To get to it, we right-click on the My Computer and go to Manage. And when you do that, it'll bring up computer management for you. Microsoft Management Consoles, MMCs. So the one we just talked about, computer management, is one of these MMCs, Microsoft Management Consoles. The nice thing about MMCs is it allows you to make your own tool sets. Just like they have created for us already, this computer management one is one that Microsoft created. You can create your own called Jason's Management or Jason's Toolset or wherever you want to call it. The nice thing about it is you can go ahead and just go into the action, and there's where you can add modules. And so, for instance, this particular one, someone has added in their own tool set. So this is Jason's Tools. And I put in the computer management. I put in a device manager. I put in some IP security stuff. I put in some services, some firewall stuff, and some trusted platform module. And maybe those are tools that I use all the time. And I can actually save this to a thumbstick. And as I go around to somebody's computer, I can pop it in and have access to those tools. So you make your own little tool sets. Instead of having to go and find each one individually through the Microsoft operating system, I have them all consolidated in one place. It's basically a bunch of shortcuts. Services. So services are programs that are going to run in the background of the operating system. Things like our print spooler, our wireless network configuration, and our DHCP client services. So if you go into the services, you'll see everything that's running in the computer in the background. So when you turn on your computer, there are literally dozens of programs that are running in the background called services that you're not even aware of. For instance, when I go here, all these ones that automatic started, these are all programs that are running. The CNG key isolation, the certificate propagation, computer browser, the CompTIA system application, etc., etc. We're only looking at C, D, E, F, and G here. And this goes A through Z, so you can see how many there are. There's like dozens to sometimes up to 50 or more. If you get a malicious software, one of the places that malicious software loves to hide is as a service, because services are started upon booting the computer. So if I'm running a virus or a malicious piece of software, I might want to get it installed as a service on your machine, so every time you reboot, it shows up. If that happens, you can go into services, double click on the icon here, like DNS client if that was my malicious software, and I can stop it and I can remove it. I can stop it and then I'll be able to remove that piece of software. If it's currently running as a service, you try to remove it, it's going to tell you failed, it's in use. So you have to stop it from the services first and remove it. We'll talk more about that when we get to security. But just to keep that in mind, that's one of the places you'll see on the A+ test of where you'll use services is to remove malicious software or to stop it from running. So you can then remove it. Task scheduler. So task scheduler is pretty handy. You can use it to run a task at a given time or based on a given action that occurs. So to get the task to schedule, you can actually get to it from the computer management module. So if you notice here, we're in computer management and we clicked on task scheduler, which opens it in the right pane. To create a new task, you're going to click the create task and follow the wizard. And again, you can set this up so that every morning at 7 a.m., it's going to launch your MP3 player and play some song for you. That's your new alarm clock. I've had people use it for that. You could do it so that every day at 3 a.m. it's going to kick off your backup of your hard drive. Every day at 2 a.m. it's going to download the new antivirus updates. These are all things we could schedule a task scheduler. You do want to play with this and get a little familiar with it. One of the simulations that some students have seen in the past is where they've asked you to create a task. So you'll have to go into task scheduler and create a task to do a backup every day at 3 in the morning or something like that. Users and groups. So again, you can get to this from the computer management under local users and groups. And you'll see the users and the groups underneath it. And from here, you can add new users or groups to your computer or change account details, such as resetting a user's password or their display name. If somebody types in their password wrong too many times and their account gets locked, you'll go in and unlock that user account. As a beginning technician and beginning system administrator, this is someplace you will spend a lot of your time, especially if you're like a tier 1 help desk at a company. Probably the most frequent call you're going to get is, I locked myself out of my account, can you unlock me? I forgot my password, can you reset me? Right? This is where you do all that from. And we'll play with this as we add some users, we add some groups, and we play around with that as well during our labs. Performance monitor. So under the performance monitor, we're able to determine where our system memory whether or not system memory needs to be added to our computer. You can get to it under computer management, or you can type in perfmon for performance monitor in the command prompt and it will launch it for you. And what it looks like is something like this. So you can notice here we have our processor time. We have the amount of memory being used. And as you go through the different tools, you'll be able to see how much memory is being used, how much processor is being used, how much reading and writing is going onto your hard drive, and be able to see a lot of that. And again, when we get to our computers and we do the lab, we'll pull this up and play with this as well, just to show you guys what it looks like. The way you can determine whether or not you need more system memory is if you go to performance monitor and it's constantly pegging high on memory, system memory, and it's doing a lot of reading and writing to your hard drive, that means you're running out of memory for the amount of programs you're running. So you want to put in more physical RAM, which will then increase the amount you have and decrease the amount of writing to the hard drive. That'll speed up your performance on your computer. Virtual memory. So if you don't have enough physical RAM, what ends up happening is it's going to use your hard drive and use a swap file as a way to write to the hard drive and pretend it has enough RAM to be able to do what you want. This will work. The only problem is it's going to slow you down because memory is significantly slower than RAM. This is only used when there's insufficient RAM, and so it's going to store it to the hard drive instead. And it does cause a huge performance decrease because, again, that hard drive has to spin up and spin down each time. You can use your performance monitor to see if you need more RAM. If you see pages that are constantly at 100% RAM, it's time to get yourself some more RAM, okay? You don't want to be in that 80, 90, 100% RAM utilization. Again, RAM's cheap, RAM's easy, put some more RAM in. Here you can see virtual memory. We have managing our paging file or swap file. You can create a custom size if you want to and set it, and then you'd hit OK. Or you can let Windows manage it automatically, which is what's happening on this particular one right now. Device Manager. We played with this the other day when we built our computers out. In Device Manager, we can actually see the driver details, such as the resource and version information for any hardware in the workstation. If you have a red X, there's an error. If you have a yellow question mark, there's an issue. When we installed, for instance, our wireless networking cards, we got that yellow exclamation mark until we installed the driver, and then it went away because then it understood how to talk to that device. So again, you'll end up doing that. You can get to it from computer management, and there's the Device Manager, and there's a list of all the devices in this particular computer. Local security policy. So local security policy is going to allow us to do all of the things that we need to set up security on our computer. Things like how long should that password be? Is a 4-character password okay, or do we want it to be at least 8 characters or at least 14 characters? Do we want it complex where we have to have uppercase and lowercase, special characters and numbers? We'll learn in security that we want those things, right? And we can set that in here. The other thing we can do is age. How long can you use the same password? 30 days, 60 days, forever? Those are things we can change in here. You can see those listed here under the password policy. Under the account lockout tab, you'll also have things like, do we disable an account if they try logging in 4 times wrong in 30 minutes? We'll lock the account, make them call customer service, right? Or something of that nature. Or are we going to do it where if they fail to log in correctly 4 times in an hour, we'll have them wait 30 minutes before their account's unlocked? We can set those type of things to do automatic unlocks for them in the account lockout policy. So those are 2 big areas that you're going to deal with for password management, especially as a local admin. And you can get there by going to the Start menu, Programs, and then under Administrative Tools, you'll see the Local Security Policy in Windows 7. And again, we'll play with that in our lab. The Windows Firewall. Windows Firewall is a software firewall provided by the operating system that helps prevent attackers and malicious software from getting access to our workstation from the internet. This is aimed at home users. If you're a corporate or enterprise user, you're probably going to have a network-based firewall to protect you as well. And you may use this in addition to that, but not rely on this solely. For the home user, though, it works fairly well and it does stop the majority of the attacks for you. And you can get to that under the control panel, under System and Security, Windows Firewall, and then you can configure it both through your public networks and your home or private networks at home or work. Advanced Security. If you go into the Advanced Security section, you have one called Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. This is for more admins to play with. The other one is for more the home users. Here, it's the same thing, but it's aimed at business users. So we can really get specific with the fact that, do I want to allow IPv6 in, for instance? Right now we're allowing it. Do we want to allow a particular program or a particular port to be open? This is where we would configure that, whether it's inbound rules, outbound rules, and we can actually see through the log what has flagged to see what attacks have been happening on our machines. And again, it's a software firewall. Print management. So one of the things we like to do from our business computers is we like to print out our documents. With print management, we can do that. We can manage all of our printers that are connected to either our workstation or the network. As you can see here, I don't have a physical printer. I only have a fax driver and an XPS document writer, which is a print-to-file solution being shown. But I can actually install the drivers or the printers here and be able to use them through print management. MSInfo32. We talked about this briefly in the last lesson. If you go to MSInfo32 at the command prompt, it's going to launch this program for you, and it's going to show you what is being used by the system. We talked about this as a pre-installation thing that we could use it. It's going to give us information about the system, the software, and the hardware on the system. So for instance, here I'm running Windows 7 Professional. This is the Service Pack 1 that I'm running. My computer name is 7 Simulator. It tells me what kind of processor I have, an i5 at 2.3 gigahertz. It tells me how much memory I have, what kind of BIOS I have, what kind of boot devices I have. If I go into the software environment, it'll tell me if I have Office installed or Adobe installed, all that type of stuff. There is a text-based version you can use at the command prompt. It's called System Info. And we'll play with that. We do our command prompt lab as well later on. DXDiag, that stands for DirectX Diagnosis. Okay, it's a utility that we use to display and troubleshoot DirectX stuff. DirectX is used by Windows for software and video. So if you get a question on the test that says somebody's having a problem with their software card or their video card, the answer may likely be use DXDiag or DirectX Diagnostics. To get to it, you go to the run prompt and you type in DXDiag and it will pop up this tab for you. You can test the DirectX software engine and update the sound and video card drivers through here. As you see, we have the System tab, the Display tab, the Sound tab, and the Input tab. Those are the 4 tabs under DXDiag. But again, the big thing I remember about that is sound and video. DirectX is used for sound and video. Component services. These are used to configure and administer COM components, which are component object models. COM applications or distributed transaction coordinator. You will have very little use for this component as an entry-level technician. You really will not get into this. This is much more in-depth Windows-specific folk. So an A+ technician is not going to be messing around in this area generally. If you're going to be dealing with this a lot, you'll get further training on it. And usually you'll end up being like a Microsoft certified professional for Windows 8 or for Windows 7, where you get really into this particular area. For us, it's just knowing that it exists. You won't see a lot of questions on this. I'd be very surprised if you see a question on this, to be honest. I don't think I've ever seen a question on this at the A+ level. Data sources. So a lot of stuff we do nowadays is run by databases. And so if we use the Open Database Connectivity, the ODBC, to move data from one database or source to another, this is not something that is going to be used again by entry-level technicians covered by the A+ exam. If you happen to see this in any kind of test question, it'll probably be a distractor. It will not be the answer. But it's not something that is commonly used by us. You're just not going to see it very often. Usually it's used much more on the server side. Windows Memory Diagnostics. It scans the computer memory for errors to check for any problems. So you have to do this outside of Windows because Windows is using the memory, right? And so you can't test it from there. So what happens is when you tell it to do it, it'll actually restart the computer. It'll boot into on its next reboot, it'll perform the diagnosis of the memory. And what it actually does is it's actually going to read and write to every piece of the memory and make sure that those are all working properly. If you get a lot of program crashes or blue screens of death, it could be your memory is starting to fail. This is a good way to test it. Another way to test it is you can actually buy a memory tester where you'll pull the chip out of the machine and put it in a specific memory test unit and it will tell you if it's good or bad fairly quickly. This is a slower way of doing it, but it does work and it's free and available inside of Windows. So if you're at a customer's house, this is a good way to do it because you may not have your memory tester with you. It'll determine if the chip is bad, and if it is, you'll want to replace that chip to get yourself back up and running. When memory starts failing, you'll often get a lot of corruption. You'll get data that is lost. You'll also get program crashes and blue screens of death, so you'll want to work on that. Regedit. Regedit stands for registry edit. Essentially, everything in Windows goes back into the registry. It is a big database. They call it a hive. And normally the registry doesn't need to be viewed or edited. It's a central repository where everything of the operating system and its internal functions all goes back into this database. You want to be very careful in working in here. It's very convoluted to work in. It's very difficult. Things are usually written in hexadecimal in there or binary. If you don't have a reason to be in there, don't mess with it, because you can really screw up the computer. Okay. If you have a reason to go in there, it's usually to get some malicious thing out. There are certain settings that you can do only from the registry. For instance, there's a setting in there where we can disable the use of thumb drives as a storage device. And in a business environment, we may want to do that to prevent people from stealing our data. But to do that, we have to dig down into this registry about 5 or 6 layers deep to find the exact line that we're looking for and change a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 0. And that would then turn that setting on or off. And again, if you're going to do that, research what you're looking at first before you go in and start playing around, because you can really cause some damage if you're in the registry. MSTSC. It's a really weird name to say remote desktop. It stands for Microsoft Terminal Services Connection. And what it does is it allows you to gain remote control of another user's computer using a remote desktop connection. It allows us to have a graphical user interface to control somebody else's computer. So let's say I call Sarah. Sarah calls me up and says, hey, I've got a problem at home, and I don't want to have to drive to her house. I can actually use this remote desktop connection to connect to her computer, take control of her mouse and keyboard from where I'm sitting, and fix it from either across the city or across the world. We use this heavily in business environments. We use this heavily because that way our technicians don't have to waste their time walking to people's desks. They can fix more people's computers if people call in and we take control. You'll see this in most corporate environments. We use this very, very heavily. Again, called remote desktop connection, which operates over port 3389, as we learned about back in networking. Or you might see it called the MSTSC, which is the Microsoft Terminal Services Connector. The newer name for it, though, is remote desktop connection, which is a lot easier to set. The command prompt, we talked about this briefly before. Again, you access it by typing in CMD at the run prompt. It is called the command prompt or the command shell or the command line interface. Any of those is the same thing. It's used to run text-based programs and perform file functions in Windows. If you're an old school computer guy, it looks a lot like DOS. This is how all of our computers started up before in the old days, right? Then we got Windows and now it's hidden in the back end. But it is called the command prompt, CMD. The user state migration tool. We talked briefly about this back in the installation and upgrading chapter, where we can use this to take data and move it from one computer to another. So the user state migration tool is the enterprise version of the Easy Transfer utility that we use for Windows 7. We have a few command line utilities that make up this user state migration tool. We can actually back up somebody's state, which is scan state. We can restore their state called load state. Or we can clean out the data store called USMT utils, which basically is going to delete all those user states that we've been saving. And so I would go over to, say, Dave's computer. I would run the scan state. I would go over to the new computer, run the load state, and I'd be able to copy all his data over that way. Again, if you're going to use this tool, you can look up the exact syntax online and walk through using it. But it is heavily used by us in the enterprise environment to move profiles around and move the data around. The Windows Easy Transfer is the graphical version of that. It's used in Windows Vista or Windows 7 to transfer data from one computer to another. We can do that either using the Easy Transfer cable, which is about a $30 cable. Basically, it's a USB cable with USB on both ends. You plug it into both computers, run the program, and it copies it all over. If you're using USB 3.0, that can copy at 5 gigabits per second. It's pretty fast. Network, you're going to be limited by the speed of your network connection. You both need to be on the same network, and then you can do it that way, over Wi-Fi or wired networks. And the last way is using an external hard disk or USB flash drive. This works well as well, because you can do this at USB 3.0 speeds of 5 gigabits per second, but you're going to double the speed of having to do it over an Easy Transfer cable, because you have to copy it to the hard drive, then move the hard drive to the new computer and read from the hard drive, right? you have the easy transfer, you can actually do it all in one shot. As it's reading, it's also writing. So the easy transfer is by far the fastest way of doing it right now. The network is probably the second, and then the external hard drive is the third. Back in XP, we had a tool called the File and Settings Transfer Wizard. It went from XP to XP. It's basically like what we did with the Windows Easy Transfer. We could do it over the network or to an external hard drive or by a direct-to-net cable. And again, it's got a nice little wizard. You click next, you follow the prompts, and it'll tell you how to do it. But again, the chances of you going from XP to XP are very slim in these days, so you're most likely going to be using the Windows Easy Transfer for Vista and 7. The Explorer. This is the graphical user interface that you use to operate the files and folders in a Windows operating system. If you use Windows for any length of time, you're very familiar with the Explorer. It's how you go through your My Documents or your My Pictures, right? It's actually, even though you didn't know this, you're actually running a program called Explorer.exe that is running this whole graphical interface for you. When you double-click on My Computer or My Documents or open a Word document through double-clicking, Explorer is actually doing all that work for you. Notepad. Notepad comes in your computer by default. It is a basic text editor. It doesn't have pretty, graphical format sizes and all that. It's just text. It allows administrators to create scripts and run basic documents and edit or view text files. To launch it, simply type in Notepad at the run prompt or from the command prompt. Or you can go into the start menu, go into programs, and then go into accessories, and you'll find Notepad there. There's also a version called WordPad, which is a newer version that actually creates rich text formatted files where you can actually change the font sizes and colors and that kind of stuff. It's a stripped down version of Word essentially. But Notepad is just basic text. What you see is what you get. You can type in basic stuff like that. So, simple question. As a technician, you want to create a customized list of common utilities that are easily accessible from the same location. What tool would allow you to build such a list? Think way back to the beginning of the lecture. Was it MSConfig, MMC, MSTSC, or MSInfo32? B, the MMC, right? The Microsoft Management Console. That's where I made Jason's tools, right? And so MMC allows you to pick and choose all these different tools, snap them in, and then you can save them and take them around with you.